Yep, good evening everyone. So last session we discussed about data binding. So we learned about angular data binding. In data binding, we discussed one-way binding. What is one-way binding? Accessing data from the source and displaying in the UI. That is one-way binding. For that, what are the techniques we have? Interpolation, property binding, and attribute binding. We have three options. So interpolation, property binding, attribute binding. Difference I told you. Interpolation is one-time rendering. Property attribute binding are continuous updates, but all are one way only. One way binding because any modification in UI will not reflect back into the source. That is why they are called one way. Next, important. So we have to discuss how two-way binding works. Two-way binding works. So what is two-way binding and how the two-way binding works? Actually, two-way binding means in two-way binding, it is the process of accessing data from source and updating to UI. So identifying the changes in UI and updating back to source, updating back into data source. Identifying the changes in UI and updating back into data source. This mechanism is called as two-way binding. So accessing data from source and updating to UI, what changes are happening, identifying, updating back to this source. That is called two-way binding. Now, how this two-way binding works and who manages all this two-way binding? Actually, I already told you that Angular manages data binding using MVC approach, MVC architecture. So by using MVC architecture, it can handle two-way binding, one-way binding or two-way binding. So generally how this two-way binding works, how it works is, see, a simple basic point I will tell you. We generally have user interface, UI. So this is called view. And the user interface, and actually we have some data. So data is usually managed by, I already told you, data is usually managed by whom? It is managed by model, right? Data is defined by model. Model contains data. Now, what happens is, so this data from the model, whatever data is in the model, this data from the model is sent to the view. That means it is passed into the view. And if any change happened in the view, it should update back into the model. but we know that this is not directly managed. So this is actually handled and managed by one more in the middle. Who is responsible for doing this? Controller. Am I right? Controller is going to do that. So that means controller is used for handling the overall communication. This work is managed by controller. Understood? So data will go from the model to view, and in the view any modification happened, it should come to the model. Now very important is when model will update the data. From view data will come to model. Will every time model update the data? Model will not update the data every time. What it will do is, it will not update the data every time. What it will do is, it will update, model updates only when change detected. Model updates only when change detected. When any change is detected, then only it updates. It will not update every time. Now the question is how it detects the changes. Change detection happens by using a simple logic. That is, if previous value is equal to current value. If previous value is equal to current value, what does this means? That means the old value, new value, both are same. That means there is no change. So that means there is no change in the value. So it doesn't need to update. When it will update, if previous value is not equal to current value. If previous value is not equal to current value, for example, previously, suppose some name is John, like this. Now this name is presented in the UI as John, and that we are displaying in a text box. Understood? In a text box, we are displaying that John. Now what happened is, there is no modification happened. If there is no modification happened, then it will not update anything into this. When it will update the new value, suppose anybody changes the name here. Am I right? Anybody changes the name here. So suppose the name is changed from John to some David, like this. Now what happens? The model is going to verify whether the previous value and correct value are same. If the previous value is not equal to current value, then it identifies that some change occurred, and automatically it will update that change into the source. That means internally, without writing any logic, who is verifying change occurred or not? Internally, without writing any logic, who is verifying that change occurred or not? That is verified by model. Model is going to verify whether change occurred in the data or not. If there is change occurred in data, it updates. So that is the reason in this model in MVC framework, it is called as, we generally call model as single source of truth. Single source of truth. In almost majority of all Angular interviews, they ask, what is single source of truth in Angular? What is single source of truth in Angular at experience level? So single source of truth in Angular is reference to a model. It is a technique referred to model. Why model is called single source of truth? Because it contains information about whether the value changed or not. The truth about value means is it changed or not? Who contains the truth? Who contains the information whether changed or not? Who tells the angler that value changed or not? That is done by model. So model is referred as single source of truth. That means model will do lot of work. It will store the data. It will verify the data. Even it will validate the data. Storing the data, verifying the data, validating the data, all such things are done by model. So in two-way binding, who plays the key role? In two-way binding, the key role is played by whom? Model. Model plays the key role. Actually, so two-way binding, angular two-way binding is managed. Angular two-way binding is managed by model. And very important is model is referred as single source of truth. It is referred as single source of truth. Model referred as single source of truth. So model keeps the traces of data. Model keeps the traces of data. So that means, so previous value is equal to current value. That means no change detected. If previous value is not equal to current value, then change detected. And whenever change is detected, it updates the changes into data. So entire work is managed by model. So model is going to identify the changes. Model is going to track the changes. And if change occurred, then it will update the change. So model is considered as single source of truth, right? I will show you a simple diagram here. Means generally what is one-way binding and two-way binding. So just in one-way and two-way binding. So presentations, Angular. Actually in this we have a two-way binding. Yeah, this is the basic of one-way and two-way binding. One-way binding is one-time merging. That means whatever data is present, it is going to the view in one direction only. Two-way binding is two ways, continuous updates. We call this as single source of truth. That means it is continuous changes. So model is considered as single source of truth. That means whatever data is there, so it is sent to the UI. Any change in the UI, it will update back to the model. So model is going to manage everything. Remember, this is not present in so many advanced technologies, including React.js. React.js is the competitor for Angular in various ways. But React.js don't have two-way binding. React.js supports only one-way binding. Angular supports two-way binding. Then if React is not supporting two-way binding, then how they manage two-way binding is manually they have to write logic. Now, what is the advantage of having two-way binding internally supported? Without writing logic, it will manage. That means two-way binding can be done in JavaScript jQuery also. But if a technology is supporting two-way binding, that means it can manage updates without logic. It can manage updates without writing any logic. If a technology is not supporting two-way binding, it have to be managed by using logic. Explicitly, we have to write the logic. So generally, I will tell you the concept. Means the concept is, suppose we have text box, we have some username, it is some John. Like this, we have some username is John. Now username is a property. This property value is displayed in this text box. If that property value is displayed in text box, that means it will contain the word John. Now, whenever any modification happened, that modification is updated back into this username. Now, the question here is generally how you will notice that modification happened, some change happened. Actually, in JavaScript, I hope you know, we have to write events like on change. We have to write events like on key up. We have to write events like blur, on blur. Blur means loses the focus. You finish it typing, come out, then it is called blur. Actually, on change indicates value changed or not. On change indicates value changed or not. On change, what happens? It will update back to the source. So on change is what? On change is a event. So in general JavaScript, events we write like this. But in Angular, we write events in a parenthesis. That means we write in a parenthesis like change. That is the event. Suppose I need to write a click event. We have to write click. So that means, for example, for a button, we need to write a click event. Then we have to write in a parenthesis click. So click which function, we have to define the function name. It will execute that function. Generally in JavaScript, what we do, we have to write on click. Events are written by using a parenthesis. Okay. What is square brace in Angular? Square brace in Angular is property. Parenthesis is, this is event binding. This is property binding. Understood? Event binding and property binding. So what property binding will do? Take the value and show in UI. What event binding will do? Identify the change and update back to this. So entire two-way binding is managed by property binding and event binding. Understood? So two-way binding is completely managed. Two-way binding is completely managed by using property binding and event binding. That means first what will be there? First property binding. That means take the value and display in UI. Second what? Event binding. What is event binding? Identify the change and update back. So now two-way binding uses this representation like this, square brace in that parenthesis. So two-way binding uses this technique. That means a square brace in that parenthesis. What this square brace indicates? Property binding. What this parenthesis indicates? Event binding. So what property binding will do? Take the value and display in UI. What event binding will do? Identify the change and update back into the source. Who is going to manage this both property and event binding in Angular? It is managed by model, and Angular models are defined as ng model. Angular models are defined by using ng model. Ng model means Angular model. What this Angular model is, it is a framework component. It is a framework component. Which framework component? MVC framework component. What this Angular model will do? It will manage property binding and event binding. Good. How it will manage property binding and event binding? By using these techniques. That means ng model is Angular model. What this Angular model will do? Whatever data is present, that data it will display in UI. By using which technique it will do? Property binding. After that, any change occurred inside that UI, it will update that by into this model by using which one? Event binding. That means, remember, it is not like event binding and property binding. Because first property binded, then event binded. That is the approach we write. Almost in every website, YouTube channel on internet, you will find people telling you square brace parenthesis for ng model, but nowhere you will get this clarity that square brace is property binding, parenthesis is event binding. They will simply tell that write in square brace parenthesis. Why in square brace I have to write a parenthesis? This is asked at experience interviews. Right? What does that means? Right? Fresher knows that this is two-way binding, but he don't know why it is written in this way. Right? What is the architecture behind this? Architecture behind this is what we discussed now. That means first we need to bind the properties, then we need to bind the events. Because entire model binding is managed, data binding is managed by the property binding and event. So how this is going to work? Who is going to manage this ng model? What is ng model? Ng model is Angular model. Right? Okay. Now another point is ng model will not work directly in Angular. Because ng model is a MVC component which is present in a special module called forms module. That means this ng model is not available in Angular core library. It is not present in Angular core library. So you cannot directly use this in Angular. So it is present in a separate module called forms module. This forms module is present in a library, Angular forms. That means first what you have to do, you have to import the forms module and from Angular forms, then only ng model can be used. Angular model is responsible for two-way binding. Let's see how it works. First, I will show you a basic point. See. Now, how the two-way binding concept works, let's see. Suppose we are declaring a simple property here, public username. Username is a string type. In that, I defined some John. Now, I need to bind this to text box in the front end. In the front end, we have username and there is a text box. Input type is text. In the text box, I want to display. Let's see localhost. In the text box, I want to show. So in the text box, if I want to display that username, I have to bind to a property called value. Am I right? To value, we have to bind what is it? Username. Then whatever value is there, it will be here. Now below this, I will put a paragraph and say hello and we will display this username here. Then I will simply use a binding expression. What is it? Username. Then it is saying hello John. I am doing some modification in this John. It is not working. That means it is currently using only one-way binding. It is using only one-way binding. Any change happened here, it is not updating. Now, who is going to manage this updating? Who is going to manage this update? So this is not correct. This is not correct because this is only one direction. Then if you want to manage two directions, then who will do that? A model have to take control. That means who is responsible for change detection? So change detection and updating changes in Angular is managed by Angular model. And Angular model is a component which is configured as ng model. Angular model is a component which is configured as ng model. So it is a member of forms module. It is a member of forms module, and forms module is a member of Angular forms library. It is a member of Angular forms library. So a library can contain lot of modules. A module can contain lot of classes, components, contracts, services, I told you. So now what you have to do is, that means model is going to manage two-way binding. How it will manage, I will show you. Actually, ng model uses property and event binding techniques. ng model uses property and event binding techniques. Square brace, it refers to property binding, and parenthesis, this refers to event binding. That means generally, so in square brace we say value is equal to some value, and in parenthesis we will write some change is equal to some function. That means some functionality to do. That is what actually we do. That means that is property binding and event binding. That means now model is referred in this way. That means syntactically we write like this now. What is it? Input type is equal to text box. Now what model have to take control of this text box? If model have to take control of this text box and manage property and event binding, we have to just use square brace. In that parenthesis, we have to write ng model is equal to, what is the reference name? Reference name is username. That means now what it will do, whatever value present in username, it will bring and display in text box. How it will bring and display in text box? Because this square brace uses a property binding technique. What it will do is, it is so intelligent, that square brace is so intelligent that it can identify what type of control it is. And according to the control, it can bind to property. For example, suppose this is string type, username is string type, and it is a text box. Then to which property this will be binded? That means what is the property? Square brace is property. Which property it will use? it will use a property called value. It will use a value property. Interesting here is if you are using input type checkbox, understood? In a checkbox, suppose I am using property binding and this as ng model, and here I am using is valid. Am I right? Suppose that is valid is a boolean, true or false. Do you know this will not bind to value? It will not bind to value because checkbox also have value, but it will not bind to value because it is boolean type. It will bind to checked property. It is so intelligent. That square brace is so intelligent that it can identify what is the type of data. According to that, it will decide to which property to assign. Whether to assign to value, whether to assign to checked, it will decide based on the control, based on the data type of value. That means lot of work that we have to do is already managed in this technology. That is why it is a framework. Right? What is the advantage of using a framework? Everything is written, just you have to use it. Right? Just you have to implement, customize. That is why it becomes easy. It becomes easy. If it is not a framework, you have to write a lot. So you have to write a lot because every functionality you need to define. And this is already there. They written everything for you. But everything may not be according to our requirement. If everything is not according to our requirement, we will write then. Sometimes what they given to us is not satisfying to us. Then what we will do, we will write our own functionality. So it is not that you will manage everything with whatever internally they provided. Many things we cannot manage. Then we have to write manual. That means by seeing this, many people ask, sir, then I don't need to write any events in Angular. You have to write events in Angular because now sometimes they will tell that don't update the value immediately when change happened. Update the value after they clicked some button. Right? Now currently when it is updating value, whenever change happened, it will update. We will tell that don't do that. Wait until all values are finished. And finally when they submit, then verify. Then we have to write manually logic. That means it is doing automatically, but that is not suitable for every situation. Then we will write manual. Right? We will see all that concept. So initially, how to manage two-way binding by using this technique. Let's see. I can't directly use this now. Why? Because lot of work is there. Remove this now. So remove this, value is not defined. So that means now it is empty currently, right? Now what we have to do, first step in this project, we need to use ng model. So first we have to import. Now in Angular 14, they have given very good concept only from Angular 14. The good concept is they allow you to import the modules for a component you want. Every component can have its own modules. Its own modules. That is the new generation component. Earlier we don't have this. Even in Angular 13 also we don't have this. From Angular 14, they designed a new type of components that in the component, which classes you want, you can import only for that component. Which module you want, you can import only for the component. But up to Angular 13, they have given a universal way. That means if you want to use any module for a component, you have to globally import. Globally import means where? We have to import in app module.ts. But now in the latest version of Angular, they given the facility of importing into every component independently, individually. That makes every component to work independent. So we don't need a library globally for all components, but two-way binding is required in all components. Then we don't waste time in importing in every component. It will be risky. If any library is required in every component individually, you can import. That technique also we will learn how to design such components. Currently, I want data binding to work in all components. Then first what we have to do, we have to go to app module.ts. Okay, here we have to import the modules. Already at the top two modules are there. What are those? Ng module, another one browser module. Here we have to import another module. There is no order dependency. You can import anywhere. Just I am keeping at one place. Which module we have to import? Forms module we have to import. Forms module is a member of Angular Forms. The module you imported, but it is not being used by Angular. How to make Angular to use this module? By configuring the module in imports. In imports, we have to configure. All classes, components are declared in declarations. All classes are declared in declarations. All modules are declared in imports. All modules that you are extra using for your project, they must be mentioned in imports. In imports, we have to import. What is it? Forms module. Now, forms module is ready. Now, if forms module is ready, now in data binding, we put a square brace. In the square brace, we put a parenthesis. In that, we will write ng model. ng model. Now, this ng model, this is also new actually. That means up to Angular 13, many learners are confused. That means whether to put parenthesis first or square brace first. So many learners are very much confused. In Angular 14, they given a IntelliSense, good error handling. In Angular 14, they improved error handling and they started showing screen tip that this is the right way for model. Earlier, we don't have this. This is also for Angular 14. And Angular team tells that this is a new feature for Angular for identifying errors easily. So that means in one of the main features of Angular 14, good error handling is the main feature now. Good, that means they improved error handling. Earlier, there was a lot of problem. That means until or unless we run, we don't see output, how it is coming. That means we don't know the error, because remember, these are all dynamically resolved. If anything dynamically resolved, after running only we can see whether it is error or not. But now they are making it statically resolved, not dynamically resolved. What is advantage of that? At compile time itself, it will verify. It will verify. So while writing itself, it will verify. That is good. This is not there in Angular older versions, only from Angular 14. So now you don't have any confusion whether it is square brace first or parenthesis, but because there is a fixed type now, right? Now, ng model, what is the reference it should use? User name. Now, what happens here? Observe carefully. This happens. That means it will get John, and actually, whatever modification we are doing here, it will be updated there. It will go back now. So two-way binding is working. So earlier it was not. And who is going to manage this? ng model. Now what ng model is doing? Actually what ng model is doing, generally what ng model is doing here, suppose we have, so in the model, so in the square brace, so in the parenthesis, in the square brace, we have ng model like this. That means this is the first one. What is it? Square brace, parenthesis, ng model. Now what it is doing is the reference name. The reference name is what? The reference name is user name. In that user name, some value is present. Now what is happening here is, by using this property binding technique, whatever value is present here, this value is binded in this location. Understood? That value is binded in this location. After that, what happens? Whenever any change happened, that change will be accessed and identified by this event binding, and it will update into this location. Understood? That means whenever change happens, that change will be updated back into the source. This is what actually two-way binding. So now model is responsible for identifying the changes, updating the changes. How it will know change happened or not? By verifying previous value and current value, by using previous and current values. So it uses a software pattern technique, which we generally call as single source of truth. We call it as single source of truth. So by using that, it is going to verify. So whatever modification happens, it will update back. Let's create one simple example with different types of elements and see how it is going to work. So let's see that. So now this is the basic technique of binding. I will give one example here, basic example, then another one we will see. First thing what we have to do, we have to go to app.module.ts. Here we have to import. What to import? Forms module. From which location? Angular Forms library. After that, there is a imports declaration. In that imports declaration, we have to import. What to import? Forms module. We have to import the forms module. After that, so you go to your component. That means we have data binding dot component dot ts. In data binding component ts, what we done? We declared a simple username. It is what type? String type. Its value is some John. Remember, lot of concepts are there. We are just in the beginning level. So much is there to discuss and work with, right? We will learn one by one, level by level, we will see. So now next step, this need to be presented in the UI. Am I right? Just data binding dot what? Component dot HTML. Here what we are doing? Username, and there is a text box, input type text. Here we need to just use ng model. And here we need to bind. What to bind? Username. We have to just bind the username. That's how we need to configure. And in the bottom, we are displaying hello. And we can just bring the username and display here. If I am displaying in a span or div or something else, then we can use property binding, inner text like that. Now this is the two-way binding related one basic example. So that is a simple example of how two-way binding works. Let's create one simple interface. Let's create a good form and see how to handle this. Right. So we will create one simple form and see. I hope everyone understood why it is written in square brace parenthesis, right? Now in this case, square brace refers to value and parenthesis refers to change. Understood? So value is the property and change is the event. It is the event. That means whatever value is stored, it is presented in the UI. And whatever change happened, it will be updated back into the source, right? That is technique. This is two-way binding. So in one-way binding, how we bind? We don't use ng model. We will directly use value. To value property, we bind a value. Then it is not updated when any modification happened. For that, we need to use ng model. Okay, let's create one example and see now. We will create a good interface. We will create a good interface. For that, see what I am doing here. In the component TS file, in the component TS, we will declare some properties. Now, actually, you can follow all the high level project architecture. You can follow all the high level project architecture, like generally how to design any component. To design any component, we will have contracts. Am I right? According to the contract, we have to design. So what we will do now, first, let's go to the app folder. In app folder, we will first create a separate folder called contracts. Okay, we are creating a contracts folder. In the contracts folder, we will add a new contract. This is product contract. Product contract.ts. What is a contract? We already learned in TypeScript. We have to design how export. Export is compulsory because we have to use in another file. Export, what is it? Interface. What is the name? Product contract. According to the contract, every product will have a name which is string type. It will have a price which is number type. It will have a stock. It is a Boolean type. And it will have a city where it is shipped. So that is also string type. Like this we define. So, and we will have different other options if required. As of now, this is enough. Later we will design more complex examples, right? Now this is product contract. According to this contract, now we will go to binding.ts file. Here we have to import the contract. You know how to import. Import, what is it? Product contract from contracts, right? We are importing product contract from contracts. After importing here, we will create, so public, we will create a product. This product will be the product contract type. It will be product contract type. That means according to that, what is the data it should have? It should have what? Name. Name is a string type. Okay, what it should have? Price. Price is a number type. Next, what? Stock. Stock is a Boolean type. I will give false. And a city. So city is what type? String type. Empty I defined. Like this we need to define. So that is how generally we do. That means directly we can create a product type. But generally what we do, first we create contracts. We import the contracts. We make the components of that particular contract type. Okay, now this product is a product contract type. Now these details we need to display, access, and do all the work we need to do with this product. So what we will do now, we will create a UI for this user interface so that user can enter name, price, stock, and city. So let's do that. In the user interface, that means in the HTML, I am designing a div. I will put a class as row. In this, I will create a div. This is a class as call3, and another div. This is a class as call9, like this. And left side, I will create a heading. This is saying that, so register product. Okay. Here we will create a data list with a data term. This is name. And for that, we will put a text box. Input type is equal to text. After that, we have data term price. We will define another input type is also text. Okay. Next, we will use a data term. This is what? Stock. Stock user can select from a checkbox. Input type is equal to checkbox. Checkbox, here we will say available. Available, and for this checkbox, I will give a new look. as form switch, and we will put a class form check input. That is a new look for checkbox. The new look for checkbox you will see, I will put a class form control, and here we will put a class form control. Okay, and one more is what? City. City is actually a drop down. That means we will put a select. In the select, we will put an option. So here we will say some Delhi, and we will say some Hyderabad. Like this, we define some city. Now, this is defined as class form select. Now you can see these are the details we defined here. This is the form we are having. And this is the new checkbox look. In Bootstrap 5, checkbox can be displayed like this. This is a switch type. This is checkbox only. Its appearance is like this. For that, we have to just use the class form switch. If I don't use this form switch, then it looks like an ordinary checkbox only. Ordinary checkbox like this. We can make it like a switch by using the class form switch. It will turn into a switch. Now what should happen here is whatever details they enter here, I want to display some beside somewhere. That means what we will do, right side column, we will create a data list. Here we will put a div. Inside this, we will put a heading. So here I will give as product details, and here we will put data list. So data term, name, another data definition, data term price, and data definition, data term stock, another data definition, and data term is city, and data definition empty. And I will put the class as row. Here we will put a class as call3, and all terms will have call3. All terms we will put call3 terms only, right? And all definitions I will put a class call9. So all definitions we will keep call9 so that they will be side by side displayed. To display side by side, we are using this method so that they will have name, price, and all this. We will keep this div with a class as, so the class will be position absolute, and so we have end 0. Position absolute and 0 will be right side. We are just keeping that in the right side corner there, right? Yeah. Now whatever details are entered, then it should display here, right side, it should display the details. Whatever entered here, they must be displayed there. Now first, how to bind? That means what we have to do, whatever these details are there, that means product name, price, stock, city, these must be first binded to these text boxes, am I right? To these controls. Then we will use two-way binding technique. What is it? In square brace, parenthesis, what is it? ng model. This is, the object is what? Product. In that there is a property called name. It is mapping to name. It is mapping to that name. That means whatever name is there, it will be binded here. Now same, this one is ng model. This is mapping to product dot price. Okay, this checkbox we will have ng model. ng model, this is mapping to product dot what? Stock. And this drop down, it is mapping to, what is it? ng model, what is it? Product dot city. Everything ready. Now you can observe whatever present in them, the default come here. Default means price is 0, you see. String is empty, and stock is false, and city is empty. So you can do one thing. So here we can put option select city, and this must be default. Actually, it is showing empty. That must be default. If you want any default, here you can put it. What is it? Select city. Then it will be used as default. It is used as default. If you say Hyderabad, Hyderabad will be default. Now what should happen? The same data should display right side here. The same data must be displayed right side there. Then what we will do? So I will shift that little bit. Actually, it is end. And so end is 50. That means it will be end 50 is too much. So end 25. Okay, then 75. So 75 is too much long. Only we have restricted. Okay, keep it end 0 only. Like fine. Now whatever data we collected, that should display here. Here name should display. You can use two techniques. We can use interpolation, or you can bind to data definition. How to bind to data definition? We have to use, what is it? Inner text. Inner text, or inner text, what to bind? Product dot name. Or you can do in this way also. Here I want to display price. Then we can use interpolation. Interpolation, what is it? Product dot price. What is the advantage of interpolation? You can add some expressions also. How I will tell you. In stock, what you can do, you can write a ternary operator. You will say if stock is equal to true. Understood? What stock is true? Product dot stock. If product dot stock equal to true, question mark. Ternary operator na? Question mark. We will put as available. Otherwise, colon. What is it? Out of stock. You know, it is a ternary operator. Directly we can have that expression there. Now here city. City will come from where? City will come from product. Product dot what? City. Now you can see by default it will show all these. That means by default some values are coming there. Values are coming here. Now I am entering some name. It will display there. I am entering some price. Then automatically that price will be displayed here. I am selecting stock available. Then it is available. I am removing that. I am turning off. Then it is out of stock. So this is available. I am selecting a city. Then it says Delhi. So I am changing the absolute position. That is the reason according to that it is changing. We can put a fixed width for that actually if we want. We can put a fixed width for that. That means we will put a class W, suppose 50. That means it will have a fixed width for that. You enter the names and it will be in the same position. It will update. Understood? You can turn on and off. Then you can select a city like this. This is accessing the data and displaying the data here. That means you will learn all of the controls like radios, check boxes, drop downs, list box, all we will learn. This is just a basic level program we saw. Now the requirement is, now anybody will say that don't update immediate. Let all the details enter. After that submit, then it should update. That is the condition. Because see, if you are working with any APIs, so every editing if you post to server, that is not good. What we have to do, collect all the changes. After collecting the changes, then confirm updating, then they should be updated. So such techniques we need to handle. For example, see what the condition asked is simple. They said that suppose put a button, say this is update product, and this button is having class BTN and BTN primary and W100. Now there is an update product button. Now the question asked is don't update immediately when they type it. Wait until all details are entered. After all details are entered, then when click on update, then it should be updated. That is the requirement. Then this two-way binding, is it satisfying for us? This kind of two-way binding is not satisfied. Then what we will do? We will implement some tricks. We will implement some events, and we will write in such a way that it is updated only when it is necessary. Otherwise, model will update immediately. It will update immediately. How to handle such tricks, we will see. For example, see what I am doing. I am creating here, simple. I am creating another product, another object, public. So this is updated product. Understood? Updated product. It is also product contract only. It is also product contract. That means according to contract, what it is having? According to contract, it is having name. Am I right? It is having name. So it is having name equal, right? According to the contract, it is having name empty. It is having price, that is number. It is having stock. Stock is false. False, right? Yeah. And it is having city. City is empty, like this. That means it is having all these details, updated product. Now what we will do is, this updated product, what we will do, we will bind here. That means not product, we will bind which one? Updated product. Everywhere we will bind updated product. Updated product we are giving, but updated product is empty na. We are using updated product. So updated product is currently empty. So what happens now? I entered some name. It is not updated. I entered some price. It is not updated. Right? It is not updated. I am changing here. It is not updated. When I click this button, then it should update. We can keep all empty. Right? Later, if we want, we can send data. That means it should update only when the button is clicked. Then what we have to do extra now? We have to write a logic for this button. How to write event for the buttons? In Angular, we write events using parentheses. What is the event? Event is click. In JavaScript, we write on click. Here click. On click, which method? We have to write method. Method is what? Update clicked. Update clicked is not a method available in your class. So what you have to do? Go to the class. Here we need to write one method. What is the method? Public. Method is what? Update product. Update product is the method. And according to method rules, the type of method is what? Void type. What this method have to do? It should collect the details coming from this product and store in this updated product. Understood? That means what is coming from the product, update into the update product. So how to access that? So this dot update product, right? Updated product is equal to, into this we have name. Name is coming from where? This dot product dot name. Understood? Similarly, what? Price. Price is coming from where? This dot product dot price. That means what they entered in text boxes. Now we are collecting them and we are updating. So another one is stock. This dot product dot stock. Now next one, what is it? City. This dot product dot city. We are doing like this. Now what happens here? So it is showing some update click. Which one? Update click is the method name. Right. So what is the method name we given? Update clicked. Here also we have to give update clicked. Okay, that is the method name, update clicked. Now see, I am entering the name, I am entering the price, I am selecting the stock, I am selecting a city and click on update, then only it is updated. It will not update until or unless you click the button. That means I am doing changes, stock out, then it is not updated. Again, I have to click update product, then it is updated. That means any modification you are doing, it is not updated immediately. And I click update, then only it is updated. That is what requirement is. Directly two-way binding is working, but every time you don't need the situation. That's what I said. Many times people ask like, then I don't need to write any events in Angular. No, you have to write. Because the situation what Angular provides may not suitable for your requirement every time, then you have to write. If you want immediately to update, no need to write all this. If you want to immediately update, just bind the name. Am I right? If you want to update on any specific event, then you have to write the event manually like this. This is what actual two-way binding concept. So the point is, if you want to directly update while typing itself, bind this product to the UI. If you want after update is clicked, then what do? Maintain another new object, same type of object. And what you have to do, collect this data when clicked. When clicked, the data is coming from these text boxes. Understood? What text boxes drop downs you are selecting, the data comes here and updates. So if I don't write this, then directly it will be doing whenever you are typing. Right? Depending on the requirements, we do this. Right? So whether to update immediate, whether to update while typing, that you decide. Right? So this is one complete example of two-way binding. So how to collect the data from the form? How do we display the data? How to identify the changes and update the changes? Accessing data, presenting, identifying the changes and updating. But here, lot of techniques you have to learn. Currently, what type of data you are presenting? String, number, boolean. Suppose if it is an array, how to present? So that means if it is a collection, so 10 values are there. How to present those 10 values here? Is simple binding is enough? No. For that we need lot of other techniques. That means in data binding, according to data type, now the binding techniques will change. If you have to display array, then how to display array? For that lot of concepts are there. This is basic of one-way binding and two-way. So how two-way binding is achieved? By using the concept of model. So model uses property binding and event binding. By using that, it updates the details. I hope you are clear. Right. Now we will see how we can handle different types of data. How to display arrays, how to display objects, how to display various kind of data. Data binding only, how to handle various types of data. That we will see in our next session. Okay, this you have to try, two-way binding, how it works. This example I will upload. So the example I showed you, I will upload. And next tomorrow, we will discuss various other presentation techniques, how the presentation happens for different data types. That we'll see in tomorrow's session. Okay, right.